Put your mic off, please, Tarek. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, world. Dear all, thank you for joining us and welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate and the month related to the impact of disaster and pandemics on World Heritage sites. I am Humberto Bonomo, Director of the Cultural Heritage Center at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, and with Fernando Perez, Karen Gole, Yolanda Muñoz, and Hilter González, we plan this seminar, one more seminar that in the session, today's session finished the second week, and with the idea to bring us profound knowledge accumulated from around the world on how pandemics and natural or social disaster have affected and continue affecting our world heritage. The speakers of this session will kindly share different case studies, experiences, and lessons, allowing us to obtain a better context related to the recent situation and state of health of our heritage. Throughout this month, we have organized more than 20 sessions and conversation, a collective effort of more than 100 people, some of which are from the most remote areas of the globe. I would like also to thank all the coordinator of each session and the presenters who will accompany us throughout this month. For those who don't know the Our World Heritage Foundation, it seems relevant to me to recall our goals. The purpose of the foundation is to promote heritage protection, conservation, and management, to support knowledge-based decision-making, to promote good governance of the World Heritage Convention, and to engage and empower civil society in heritage protection and management. Having said this, I will introduce the theme of this month, sharing with you a short video that explains how disaster and pandemics have affected the world.
Recent disasters and an actual pandemic have exposed the fragility and vulnerability of our world heritage. These exceptional sites and pieces, which we would like to preserve for all humanity and future generations, do not exist in a segregated world. They belong to our social environment and our daily life. But at the same time, the World Heritage Sites are in danger. They are threatened by natural hazards that attempt against their existence. The pandemic has revealed their fragility and how much the human presence in them is vital and necessary for their survival. How can we protect them and at the same time give them life and new meanings? If we hope for a future for them, we should stop considering them only as beautiful objects or places, merchandise for the tourist industry, and fully integrate them into the social and cultural dynamics of daily life. We propose to promote a great discussion around the world on the risks and effects of disasters and pandemics on World Heritage Sites. We invite non-governmental organizations, academies, representatives of civil society, and local governments to participate, to contribute with new proposals for public policies on the conservation and safeguarding of the cultural and natural heritage of humanity.
Today's session is informal knowledge, participation, and heritage during pandemics, and the moderator is Christina Dreyfus. Christina is PhD in Theory and Architecture at the Universidad degli Studi Roma, Roma La Sapienza, Master of Science in Architecture, Theory, History and Criticism, and a full-time professor and coordinator of History and Theory of Architecture at Universidad de Lima. Research coordinator at the School of Architecture, Universidad de Lima also. Thank you, Cristina. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Humberto. And I would like to thank all the team behind this huge effort. I've been attending some of the previous tables, and there are some very interesting ideas. That's why I was asking first, how long are you going to keep the videos online? And that's something I would encourage everybody to do, to go watch the other presentations. This is truly a global effort, and I'm very honored and humbled to be part of it. So our session is called Informal Knowledge, Participation and Heritage During Pandemics. And it was inspired by the question, what are the problems of local communities today? And this is a question that arose when we were starting discussing the way we're going to present the work of the colleagues. So this is understanding that social practices are not always related to regulations, that in fact we can have regulations, we can have measures more or less put in place, but then there are these social practices and groups and informal emergencies, so to say, that just take over. So at the lack of official responses by the authorities, informal associations and grassroots organizations have stepped up to provide for the communities while trying to maintain their well-being. Through the lens of participation, we would like to address the way groups regard heritage, sometimes even as a hindrance, the relationship with it, and the ways they make it part of their daily life through adaptations and appropriations. Believing that what heritage centers have to be living places, allowing for life to thrive and for communities to strengthen concepts like identity, agency, place attachment, do-it-yourself solutions and appropriations will be addressed as ways to incorporate World Heritage Centers to people's lives, especially in the times of COVID. So thank you very much again, and thank you to all our panelists today. And I would like to leave you with Alex Tin from University of Technology in Taipei. Alex, please, whenever you're ready.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear colleagues from all over the world. I'm Alex Yan from Taiwan, and now I'm trying to make my presentation. My topic is build back a culture-based resilience during the pandemic, Chongqing settlement experiences in Taiwan. I'm Alex Yan. I'm teaching in the China University of Technology, and I'm also a member of the ICOMOS, and I'm the vice president of ICOMOS SIPA, which is the ISC for the documentation. And I like to say that it's based on the value priority concept to preserve a cultural heritage is an international common awareness. And the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the value they carry are also an important knowledge of life can be promoted through preservation, education, and cultural tourism. That means in normal general time, but not in a severe time. Cultural tourism is an important way to promote all the value of cultural heritage, but also often bring excessive pressures. You can see this is the tourist number of the Kinmen Island, which I'm taught, where I'm trying to explain it my case study. And from 2013, and the highest point, maybe nearly 2 million tourists visit this island. But in last year, only half of them. That means it was all influenced by the pandemic. Because the pandemic reduced the impact of the cultural tourism, also have more time for the community to think about based on their own point of view, to understand their own knowledge and the value. So that means while there's a lot of tourists that visit the site, maybe the community don't have enough time to think about their daily life. And due to the pandemic, maybe the number of tourists go down, but however, it will have more time for the village people, the local people. They can think about what is the daily life of their culture again. So this report showed the interception of the feedback of the village together with the government during the pandemic. Jinmen is an island very near the mainland China, and only has 100 and nearly 150 square kilometer, and the population 140,000. And there are so many villages like this in Jinmen. For the past thousands of years, people of Jinmen have followed the path of their peace-loving nature to severe crash condition and the precious meaningful life with positive attitude. The common people longing for peace and stability have been well served by the core value of the clan-based culture. That means ancestor pray and unit all the domestic and overseas Khmer people. So in Jinmen, they have a small, even it's only a very small island, they have 130 traditional settlements, 16 national monuments, 83 county designated monuments, 147 listed historical buildings, and together with 16 intangible heritage. It's a very beautiful island full of nature and cultures. So the Chonglin settlement as a settlement stands in the middle of the Jinmen Island. And this villages has even a very small village, but has 8 monuments and the national monument and 1 county designated monument, 2 listed historical buildings, and very important, they have 2 listed intangible cultural heritage. One is so-called ancestor worship. These villages is a Thai family villages. They have 8 family temples, and together with a very famous Wing Lion God or Wing Lion Lord pray. So from 2012 to 2017, this village was organized and together with cooperate with the government. They took the 5C strategy of the World Heritage Convention, and on the conservation, they made a conservation plan of the settlement, and they try to preserve their living heritage, and they try not only depends on the government, but also they started to learn how to what is so-called shared responsibility under the 5Cs. And even though they prepared for their conservation plan for 5 years, but they don't have enough money. And it's very lucky in the year 3 years ago, 2017, our government in Taiwan, they launched a very important project, so-called Represent the Historical Site Project. There are 17 sites in Taiwan was chosen, and Chonglin Villages is one of them. Please aware that before that, Chonglin has had already prepared for 5 years. So they have their plan, and now the government project can give them some enough budget to help them to do it. So in this budget project is from 2017 to 2021. I have to say this project is before the pandemic, but it's during the pandemic. still ongoing, the project still running. This project is a so-called Chonin Millennium Settlement. Is for 1,000 years villages. So they have 43 projects, and the total budget is nearly $7 million US. And together with the tangible and intangible, and also the digital conservation, and also the public community participation. So we can see there's some restoration of the monument, the villages, and the traditional houses in the county, in the settlement. Also, they have some project preserve the intangible cultural heritage. Also, they have some education for the young generation, and some traditional drum play team was re-established again, and some other culture industry were also developed together with the local peoples. So during this project, there are 43 projects in Chongling, and maybe more than 10 projects there concerning the capacity building, because we know the culture, the conservation of cultural heritage, especially for the village people, as culture as a kind of their daily life. So they have to learn how to preserve their cultural heritage as a kind of their daily life. So there's many capacity building projects in this big project. So together with that, the risk preparedness is also very important. So we also had some projects such as the disaster mapping, and some exercise for the firefighting, and also in this project to help the local people to learn how to preserve their villages, their cultural heritages. So that is the project and the case study we had in Chongling. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for sharing this experience. I have some, and I'm sure everybody has some questions or something to say, but I would like to go ahead with the presentations, and then we get to questions and comments. So I would like to invite Artan Kakani and Doriana Musaj from Polis University at Tirana. So guys, whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Hello to everyone. My name is Artan. Beside me is Diana. We are going to present our presentation for today. It's named Material Human Resistance, Gas Rooted in the City of Tirana. Actually, what we are going to explain today, it's not a problem related only to Tirana, but it's a problem mostly for the Mediterranean basin. So most of the cities are under strong pressure from a real estate market. And this is our case of Tirana. Actually, what we see here on the map, there are three different cities. We see, first of all, we see the big color, the big blue. We see the city of excluded inhabitants, and most of this area are informal settlements. We are going to see it later. From the city center, it is the organic city growth plus the communist blocks. And now to be like in the last 10 years that there is a big pressure in this city center, in this cultural heritage that is inside the city. So we have a big passion of real estate inside of the historical sites. Let's see the first city. The first city is the city of excluded inhabitants. Actually, the problems are many, such as lack of housing planner, lack of clean water and sewage system, lack of regulation, regular electricity, so affecting the heating and cooking, scarce voltage, so energy poverty and energy deprivation. We have a monofunctional zoning due to high fee of legalization for economic purposes and lack of access to clean air to the proximity with industrial areas. And as well, a lack of infrastructure and health system coverage. Some of the COVID effects were affecting the workers, mostly of them. Mostly of these workers were working in the industries, in the industrial area, and so many of them were affected seriously. Some positive aspects of these informal settlements are that they are made of 2 or 3 stores, although the settlements are single families, so immigration mostly from in the Balkans has changed the family composition. But it's not only an Albanian matter, the family composition. Now it is also a bigger problem which now we have to face as urban planners or social workers and other forms. And the other good aspect is that many single units are made of big lots. So with big garden and open space, around 200 meters square to 400 meters square. These places played a fundamental role as a playground for the kids during the general lockdown. From the other side, we have the organic growth city plus the communist blocks. The problems are 2 forms. Many villas built during the 20s have changed their function. Examples are various bars and activities to the daily living, such as burek shops, shoemakers, and aesthetic sector. And other forms affecting the direct historical and architectural heritage and the land value as well. The other negative aspect of this city is that many of the dwellings were depreciated due to non-administration of a common property, and many cases lack of formal housing planners or a proper certificate, and there is lack of clean water. Some effects of COVID on the historical villas were on living labor under threat and on the development pressure, which follows a scheme. So the scheme is abandonment, demolition, and speculation. This is a scheme which is going not only in Albania, in Italy as well, but even in other countries, Mediterranean countries. On the communist bloc, so we have a living labor as well under threat. So living labor, we mean all those which are connected with flexible work. And we have problems affecting the renting apartments. Some of the good aspects of this are that the fauna and flora is flourishing and more municipal revenues from the building permission. Okay, it's only a financial matter by single landlords, no detailed plans. And the third positive aspect is that less income from Airbnb and more opportunities for the local students in the nearby campuses. Another aspect, negative aspect of the machine city, so it is affecting directly the public city as well, but as well what we administer. And so we have an affordable city, a low territorial equity on the distribution of the public services, and as well on affecting directly the special justice on the opportunities in the city. And some negative effects of the COVID were the long queues in the management of the public counters and the ghost city center and most of the daily hours. Some of the positive aspects are that the municipality is gaining more and more funds from the building permissions.
And while COVID-19 hit worldwide, in Albania, this year has been difficult for heritage as it was under an attack due to the uncontrolled development, which didn't begin during COVID-19 and pandemic. This is a long shot where the heritage has been in target to the uncontrolled development, and especially in the last decade, we have the main target is the historic center, especially in the capital of Tirana, where the city center, the historical city center, has a very high land value, and the interest of the oligarchs. It's mainly in this area of the capital of Albania. even before pandemic took over, the rule of law is one of the problems that the country is facing now from all the transition period now from 1990 after the dictatorship fell off and the communism changed to democracy, but we are facing 30 years of transition. And we choose from all the cases to reveal what mostly represent what is happening to heritage in Albania, the National Theatre case, which is a case that was more than 3 years now. It's involving not only Albania, but also Europe. And it's a problem that revealed all the countries facing due to the planning, uncontrolled development, land tenure issues, and the rule of law. So the rule of law has been transcendent even before pandemic took over. The public is excluded from decision-making when it regards to city development. The use of police forces towards citizens in protection of heritage buildings, it's one of a big problem that is facing the country. The infringement of the Albanian constitution, but not only, we have also the infringement of Stabilization Association Agreement between Albanian Republic and the European Union. But this is the problems. Beside the problems, the society has changed a lot in the last decade, especially where the first moment the government decided to demolish the National Theatre building built in 1938, a civic movement grassrooted in the very heart of the city center, in the yard of this theater, this old 8 years old theater. Never before in Albania was occupied a public building and a public space. So after the police attempt to demolish the first time in 24 July 2019, the citizens occupied the building. And they began to revitalize the building that was closed from 1 year and built a festival for the protection of the building, where invited everybody to come from all Europe and inside and outside the country. Also, next step was to apply to the program of Europa Nostra, the 7 most endangered sites in 2020. And they built a 24-hour safe guarded shifts that everybody had to stay there, and protocols of care were put in motion, where everything was now being cleaned up. During this 3 years of 10 months of occupation and 3 years of protest in Albania happened the earthquake on 26th of November at 4 a.m. in the morning. A 6.4 magnitude hit northwest of Albania. 51 people died and more than 3,000 went injured. More than 5,000 buildings were damaged, but the state was unprepared with humanitarian aid. Safe places were missing and people were put in tents without clothes and even food in the very first hours and in the cold winter of November. Most of the buildings did not have legal tenure, and nowadays some of them are still outside. What the civic society put at the very first moment was exactly what they had to do, is to provide humanitarian aid. So this protest, this citizen inside the National Theatre created, self-organized with an emergency rescue center and called people for disaster aid. From 1 week, more than 5,000 people came to humanitarian improvised center in course of the earthquake. The citizens trusted more their citizens than the government. A team of 200 volunteers came and helped others, and around 100 tons of disaster aid were donated by more than 15,000 people. During pandemic, after 12 March 2020, the country went in lockdown as a response to COVID-19. Several rights were restricted to fight the spread of the virus, including the right to movement and assembly. Historic center of the city transformed into a big construction site by demolishing several historical buildings during the time people were isolated into their homes. Construction sites were the only one which never stopped working. This sector of economy was increased by 14% during the first quarter of 2020 compared to 2019. On the other side, the core group of activists of the theater decided to keep on staying at the site, safeguarding the buildings 24 hours, 7 days a week, as they feared the government will use the pandemic to demolish the building. Protocols of care were changed and some community engagement changed in accordance to the new protocols delivered by WHO. With the COVID-19 outbreak, the number of people joining the resistance reduced significantly, the public was not allowed anymore, and the festival were put online. But on May 17, 2020, the last day of the lockdown, on Sunday at 4 a.m. in the morning, the building of the National Theatre was attacked in an unprecedented way by more than 1,000 unidentifiable armed police bodies, which evicted the activists, violently terrorizing them with arms. Several historical buildings have been destroyed during 14 months of pandemic now. The historic High School of Tirana, Sami Frasheri, the National Theatre, the historic maternity, the clock tower surrounding area, and dozens of urban villas declared as monument of culture are destroyed and replaced with multi-story buildings. The historic city center is developing now in high towers from 30 to 44 floors by raising its heritage sites. After the theater was demolished the next day, even though Europa Nostra nominated it as one of the most endangered sites 2020 in Europe, the activists did everything, and after demolishing, civic protests were announced with the new aim now to reconstruct the National Theatre, as now it represented more than just a building, it representing the right to culture, the right to democracy. An international petition was prepared with a request to reconstruct the theater where it was, as human right. The case now is under judiciary authorities such as Constitutional Court, Special Prosecution Office, Prosecution of Tirana, Administrative Court. All of these courts have been initiated, all of these lawsuits have been initiated from citizens, from the people of the country, from society. And this changed the way the country faces with democracy and with the human rights. Thank you. Yes, sorry, you have to close.
So this is the last invitation from us, from Polish University. On September, we are going to organize a conference. It's Tirana Design Week, and our focus is going to health and well-being in the post-pandemic city. So you are invited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artan and Mariana. It was very interesting, even though rather sad. So, well, we will talk about that later. So I would like to leave you with Tarek Teba from the University of Portsmouth. Tarek, okay, there you go.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you for this opportunity to speak and listen, of course, to everyone here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone in the world. My name is Tarek Tiba, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Portsmouth at the School of Architecture. So today I took the opportunity really to explain to you and show you some work the University of Portsmouth in collaboration with different heritage and organizations and higher education institutions have done in terms of heritage in the Middle East, particularly focusing on our work in Egypt during the pandemic, actually. So that hopefully will give you some insight to our work. So in general, giving you just general background of my work, I'll not go through all those bullet points, but just to give context about what I do. I hold different leadership and research management activities at the University of Portsmouth. Many activities about leading research groups within the university, within the region, but also the last formed research group or research hub is what I'm talking to you about is the Middle Eastern Heritage Hub. So the Middle Eastern Heritage Hub is a research collaboration between heritage organization, heritage institution, and higher education institutions in the UK, Italy, Turkey, and different countries in the Middle East, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Syria. So, and of course, we are growing, and the number of projects are growing now. So today, basically, I'm talking to you about our core principles, but also our work we have done in Egypt. So the hub took the advantage of focusing on key themes based on the interest of different institutions, but also based on the challenges heritage is basically encountering in the Middle East and elsewhere. So these four themes, heritage and community, heritage and conflict, heritage and smart and creative technologies, and heritage and smart and future cities are the key themes this hub is taking forward with different initiatives and with different projects in collaboration with those countries and institutions. But today I'm talking mainly about the community-driven approach to heritage regeneration in Egypt and how we really can generate impact through research into the perception, but also the highlighting the impact heritage buildings, heritage sites, and even heritage cities have on people resilience and on the resilience of cities, and how creative tools can encourage and push the impact forward a step further. So in this project, we have, in collaboration with the University of Alexandria, Dr. Nivin Gharib, and 5 research assistants, we have explored the question of, is heritage useful in the time of pandemic? Have people got better resilient, better social interaction within heritage context in comparison to contemporary context of architecture and urban design? But also, we explored the question how different modes of technologies would help people to cope with lockdown, but also to engage in the meantime with their heritage. This basically raised a very particular question about how we really value heritage, and it is a project we are doing today, and I'll give a brief insight about it at the end of this presentation. So our first focus is basically to explore vernacular heritage and to explore historic context and how people and how community coped with lockdown within this context. So we focus on a very particular vernacular context in Egypt, and we explore this context at different 3 scales, from a very house scale into a close neighborhood scale, but also into a general scale, in order really to identify and map the activities happening at those different scales with the lockdown restrictions and with the kind of the pandemic going on within this area. So basically, the project activity or the research activity have happened while Egypt was under lockdown and before and after. So basically, we captured how even the momentum of social interaction has changed, but also how that happened in comparison with contemporary urban sprawl, in order really to identify how much urban heritage is useful in this regard. So as I mentioned, like, the analysis has happened at different stages, and we focus basically on the social activity and social interactions, how that happened within the time of pandemic, especially for different age groups, from elderly people into very young children, and how all they coped with this lockdown. But also we analyzed at urban scale, in addition to that close landscape scale around houses. So we found out basically, in comparison with urban sprawl, that people have much better social interaction, and these intangible social values embedded into this vernacular architecture have helped them to feel much safer and much protected, against the pandemic, and they could really cope with lockdown and have the proper social interaction with, of course, safety measures without really being locked into their apartments or into their high-rise buildings, as happened in the urban sprawl. That led us to really to explore, are heritage buildings useful for lockdown, and how that impact people have to lock down inside. So we were in the first focus, we were talking about people who don't have really to quarantine, people who can go out, but basically a pandemic didn't allow them to go beyond their area. But the second stage of this project, we focus on people who wanted to quarantine inside, and we started exploring how heritage building could be a better tool or a better context, a better assets for the city to give better lockdown, better quarantine for those people, comparing two levels of quarantine: individual quarantine in apartment in comparison to a traditional house, and mass quarantine or mass isolation between schools used in Egypt in comparison with a structure called Khan, or it's in English, but it is about a commercial mixed building with commercial activities in the ground floor and residential activities on the top floor. But we really have, we're focusing on analyzing those buildings and comparing between these two situations according to design principles, materiality, and environment, linked basically to what impact of lockdown affected people in terms of physical activities, mental well-being, but also social interaction. And we found out basically heritage buildings really contribute to better social interaction, better well-being. In addition, in terms of scientifically speaking, materials of historic building has less contamination or transmission in comparison with contemporary material. This basically led us to very interesting conclusions. We are still basically in the process of finalizing this in a way to confirm scientifically how that would work in much better way, because this led into much insight into heritage organizations and councils into using those buildings during pandemics in general, while they are closed to public, into useful things for people having to quarantine in inside. So this is kind of insight of how we started figuring out different activities, different movement inside the house, but also inside the wakala, or in or khan, whatever referred to. That basically, after that, we moved to some interesting historic assets in Alexandria, which are the historic gardens. And especially people couldn't really reach those gardens. Of course, they are open space, but they are also cultural spaces. They are linked to the city memory and people use, which basically we started, and this is still a project in progress, but we started identifying better engagements between people and their heritage using different modes of technologies and integration in order really to arrive to better preservation or digital preservation strategies for such historic monument or historic sites, but in the meantime, better engagement with people who don't or can't really achieve being in the site, either because of the pandemic or any other reasons. That's basically opened the last project we are developing now on how we challenge the valuation process and how we really can involve community through cultural mapping or through looking at, for example, the heritage urban lenses or urban landscape lenses in order really to allow community input into the process, because generally in the Middle East, heritage valuation is a top-down approach, which sometimes having this macro picture of heritage is useful. But basically, heritage heritage valuation, unfortunately, is not taken into consideration how that heritage is useful for community and perceived by community from different perspectives. Because through the Middle Eastern Heritage Project, we found out how much heritage can contribute to community life, community resilience, and community well-being in different ways, apart from being only authentic historic fabric coming from the past, and mainly link it to the intangible values and intangible contemporary social values that link the contemporary community to these heritage assets. And that's why we need to look at community as a very diversified component. Community, we have different types of community, we have different ways of looking at communities. The same way we need to look at heritage. Heritage is not a physical, is not a tangible thing. It's basically something that we can approach from different angles, and the best factor or the best actor can help us to make heritage matter is community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tarek, for this very interesting presentation and very interesting use of the physical sites during the pandemics. I would like to invite Claire Cardinal Pett from the University of New Mexico. Claire, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm very interested in what we've heard, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from the rest of our speakers. As you may know, indigenous communities in the United States have faced serious challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under this threat, several tribes quickly reinforced their defenses of their language keepers. This presentation shares some challenges and stories of success. In 2019, the UN called for a decade of action to safeguard linguistic diversity. The program established February 21st as International Mother Language Day. This is to be celebrated annually with the goal of promoting the cultural diversity that linguistic diversity engenders. The program also celebrates multilingualism as a consequence of cultural diversity. Language is certainly one of the purest expressions of intangible culture and cultural heritage. It is a social construct built and maintained by formal and informal practices. Many world languages have been endangered by colonization and genocide. Most are rooted in oral traditions, which are woven into other intangible cultural heritages like music, dance, storytelling, and theater. These practices also give life to material cultures and the arts. Language is perhaps the mother culture. Against the odds, some marginalized languages have survived, but effort to transcribe and preserve them constitute a threat to the inherent orality of their production and reproduction. Even those languages that have long-standing text-based traditions need to be voiced. Languages that have only recently been transcribed will not live on unless they are spoken. All languages, especially those that originate from oral traditions, are embodied. They are dependent on people and cultural practices to keep them alive. As living things, they are constantly changing, improvising, becoming. In the United States, only 372,000 people reported speaking an indigenous language at home to the 2010 census. Intergenerational transfer of language skills within intimate domestic environments is as essential as it is within more formal educational settings and the spaces of ceremony and ritual. It is the very everydayness of language that keeps a mother tongue alive. According to Greg Anderson, director of Living Tongues Institute for Endangered Languages, with the loss of the languages, all kinds of wonderful things that speakers did with their languages also vanished. For example, some of the greatest works of oral literature ever produced, the multilingual performances with different characters speaking different languages that were found in the Pacific Northwest. The highly elaborate dances that accompanied the oral tradition are frequently also gone. Large amounts of local knowledge about fauna and flora, ecosystem management, local place names, spiritual values, and so on are all submerged, altered, or gone because the original languages that express these concepts are gone or no longer well understood. There were at least 2,000 indigenous languages in the Americas at the time of contact. There were at least 300 in the area that is now the United States. According to experts, this scale of diversity existed throughout the United States. Many languages are now extinct and most are endangered. Only about 175 remain. Of those survivors, only about 20 will continue to be spoken in 2015 unless intervention happens. For example, only 5 language families exist in Oregon today, and these languages are preserved by only a few adult speakers. 200 years ago, there were 14 language families in Oregon, which is more than all of Europe. The dramatic loss of language diversity has various causes, but one of the most significant, of course, was the demographic apocalypse that occurred immediately following the introduction of European diseases. The number of indigenous people in US territories dropped from about 10 million in 1492 to less than 300,000 in 1900. The collective historical trauma of pandemics is woven into the stories of many indigenous cultures. While the losses that occurred after 1492 were catastrophic, there were enough people, places, and cultural knowledge left to seed a recovery for some tribal groups. It has taken centuries, however, to stabilize and rebuild population and human capital. Of all the groups in the United States, the Navajo in the southwestern states, the Eskimo Aleut in Alaska, the Lakota and Dakota, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, and the various Pueblo people in New Mexico have the most native language speakers. While other tribes have created strong language preservation programs, these groups have the strongest chance of keeping their mother tongues because the languages are still integrated into their everyday lives. Unfortunately, the most fluent speakers in most tribes are the elderly, primarily women. For example, the average age of fluent Lakota-Dakota speakers is 70. The COVID-19 pandemic has created another demographic crisis for indigenous people in the United States. At the beginning of the outbreak, infection rates were almost 4 times higher in these communities, and the incidence of serious disease and death was twice the rate of other racial groups in the United States. Remarkably, however, the elders in indigenous communities appear to have had better outcomes than white people in the same age group. Most tribal communities in the United States did a better job protecting the elderly than the dominant culture. Some, such as the Lakota and Dakota, prioritize fluent speakers of their mother tongues for vaccination. The collective historical trauma of pandemics is, for sure, woven into these cultures. While it's still too early to know for certain, there is evidence that the fundamental social organization of most tribal communities in the United States created vectors for rapid transmission of the virus, but also allowed for a more effective response once the risk became apparent. Informal networks anchored in extended families eventually spread the word. Unfortunately, the virus followed those same paths. The disease traveled easily among the most active and mobile, who were among the first to get sick and die. The numbers were shocking. The federal government's response was even less effective for indigenous communities than it was for the rest of the country. And you guys know how ineffective the United States response was to the pandemic. Tribal communities rallied quickly and nimbly to protect their elderly. They used electronic social media as effectively as they used the embodied word of mouth. They shut the borders of their sovereign territories to create large areas of quarantine. In New Mexico, the Rio Grande Valley pueblos were hit hard at first. But like the Navajo Nation, they are now nearly COVID-free and almost completely vaccinated. Elderly white people like me have been invited to get vaccinated at one of several clinics throughout what we call Indian country. And here is Maxine Wildcat Barnett celebrating her 94th birthday. She is a Yuchi language fluent speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire, for this very thoughtful insight on non-tangible heritage. I would like to invite Jose Cepero from Lima. He's at the coordinator of Urban 95 for the municipality in Lima. So Jose, the floor is yours.
Hello, thanks Christina, and thanks to the organization for inviting me to this table. I have heard all your presentation, and it's really nice to see that all of you are working on heritage on your own countries. I'm gonna share my screen to show you what we have been doing here in Lima, and I wanted to give you a brief context of this city. Lima has been known as the city of the kings for long years, since the Spanish conquerors came. In January 18th, in 1535, Francisco Pizarro, another Spanish conquerors, founded the city of Lima. And here you see a representation of that event. And as we are trying to talk about local knowledge, you will see that these were the local knowledge that was here in Lima due to the Inca Empire. We had a lot of channels that give water to the valley, to the valley in Lima, and there were a lot of government buildings that were made by rammed earth and adobe. But here you can see the overposition of the idea of the city that the Spanish conquerors took here. you know, if you contrast the local knowledge versus the overposed city, you'll find that local knowledge wasn't taken on consideration when planning the city of Lima. And I want you to be aware of this red point, because we're going to talk about that zone of the city. When the Spanish conquerors came, they proposed a city of 12 by 12 blocks that has in its surroundings the place for labors to live, and some Inca reductions. As time passes, in 1991, the UNESCO declared that the historical center of Lima was part of the humanitarian heritage. And they proposed this plan as the protection zone, you know. They proposed 3 rings in the logic of the first ring was the most important and the one to preserve, and the other ones were less important than the first. And if you come to Lima, you see pictures like this in our historical center. Is that beautiful, isn't it? But on its surroundings, I'm referring to that red dot I mentioned early. You see Barrios Altos, which is right at the next of these kind of pictures of places, and you see this one. A lot of abandoned houses, heritage that is not so good in good conditions, and a lot of people being harmed because of these situations, because of the abandoned buildings. And in that red point that I mentioned, you find Jardín Rosa de Santa María, which was known before as La Huerta Perdida. And it's right on this red spot. That red spot is like this today. And you'll see that it's a neighborhood that has grown in an informal way, with a lot of problems related to lack of public services and especially crime. La Huerta Perdida was known as one of the most dangerous places in Lima. That's why the people there try to avoid being known as dangerous people and change the name of the neighborhood to start a process of changing the neighborhood. And the streets are like this, and this is not so far from places that I shown, and you can see that the contrast between what we call heritage and the surroundings of those places is really high. And you can find places like this that are public spaces, but they don't have the same conditions and the same care of the local government in the past years. As COVID-19 arose here in Lima, our local government, where I work, we launched a program called Lima Te Cuida, Lima Cares for You. That was the first and the main response of the local government to assist and deliver services, especially for vulnerable people inside the city of Lima. We started the work especially in Jardín Rosa de Santa María because it was the main neighborhood related to the historical center, and they were in strongly need of help. Lima Te Cuida, as a metropolitan program, has 10 lines of action related to mobility, security, healthcare, humanitarian assistance, and public space improvements. Most of the actions related to Lima Te Cuida are considering local knowledge and the participation of communities in the work of recovering them from the situation of the pandemic. We try to work a lot based on what the neighbors can offer to be better in like living in community, you know. And in that special context, we try to work in two dimensions. One is the social dimension, and the second one is the physical dimension. Talking about what we did on the social dimension, we tried to launch and pilot a community-based early childhood development service that we call Lima Wawakuna. This program tries to also take advantage of the local knowledge and try to empower the leaders and the mothers of young children to be aware of their caregiving and all the context of the neighborhood. And this also relates to capacity building, not only for the mothers and the caregivers, but also for the frontline workers that are involved in the actions that Lima Te Cuida delivers in these vulnerable neighborhoods. This program is based not in stimulation of the young children, but in the accompaniment of their growth and their development. So this space called Wawateca is prepared for the young children and the caregivers to let them explore what they want and build their own development on the activities they are involved. You can see here, considering all the protocols that we need to get because of the pandemic, that this frontline worker is helping the caregiver of the children to let her explore and do whatever she wants to do for playing, because we empower play as one of the main tools for early childhood development. Here you can see one of the reunions. This was one of the closing reunions last year that tried to involve all the caregivers, the young children, and also the frontline workers which we work with. And the other dimension of the work that we try to do with Lima Te Cuida and related also to early childhood development is public space improvements. And the project I'm going to present you is El Wawa Parque, that if you see is right next to what we call Wawateca. So it's a matter of trying to relate all the services that the municipality wants to deliver in the neighborhood, taking advantage of the local knowledge and trying to make an integral intervention in the neighborhood. So we plan also on a community engagement strategy to involve not only the caregivers but the kids in the building of and recovering of this public space. This is a tactical intervention that is planned to evolve and turn into a more complex and long-lasting intervention. But here we try to make the identity of the neighborhood reflected on its walls and on the materials and forms of the intervention. And we also involve the young children in the process of transformation. And here you can see some of the contrast of changes, and you'll see that this is not so related to heritage in the terms of aesthetic, but as it is in the surroundings of the historical center, we must recognize that here the heritage has a different expression, but we need to address the challenges that they have here. So you see the before and the after, and as I mentioned, it's a tactical intervention that tries to tackle the activation of this public space and the recovery for especially the young children and their caregivers. Here you can see also another transformation and one of the main places to play for the children. And also we are still involving the caregivers, giving them the responsibility of taking care of the trees and the green areas that we have implemented. So it's not only trying to involve them in the transformation, but also on the maintenance to allow them find a good place attachment to allow the municipality to maybe go to other places to do the same work, but not losing the work that we have done here in Jardín Rosa. So to finish, what we have learned in this process, we are always looking for trying to address local knowledge and to incorporate it into the structure of the municipality. And as local government, we're trying to feel the people that are benefited by the programs, that they are not just receivers of the services and products that we are implementing, but they are active stakeholders that need to be involved in the transformation of their own neighborhoods and of their own communities. So thanks a lot, Cristina, for the invitation and all the organization, and looking forward to discuss these ideas we have present here.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you all for your interventions. I would like to propose a couple of questions to start the discussion, but please feel free to add your own questions and to make this a conversation rather than an interrogation. But I would like to address one of the main arguments that we all shared, and I include myself because I feel that some of the fields of interest are very common. The idea of informality, not just as a way in which the city develops, which is something we've seen almost in every case, but also as a way of addressing issues. And I would like to use one word that has been heard repeatedly: everydayness. How do everydayness fit in the conservation of not just sites, but also intangible heritage? That's one of the questions I would like to assess. How do you think that in the case studies you proposed, the role of everydayness was critical, also considering that we have like two everydaynesses, the one we used to have before COVID and the new situation, like Artan and Doriana exposed on this demolition of the theater because everybody was locked inside, right? So we have these two moments that could become assets, but that are also very dangerous situations, both for tangible and intangible heritage. And the other question I would like to propose to the table is this kind of dichotomy between rules and grassroots organization. We could, again, use the word informal. Sometimes there is conflict between the rules and what people would like and what people would prefer. Sometimes there is some sort of participation, but there is this point of confluence excuse me, between bottom up and grassroots informal strategies. So I don't know if you would like to maintain the order we had for the presentations, so everybody have an opportunity to expand on these two subjects if you would like. And if that's the case, I would like to invite Professor Jen to start the discussion, if that's okay.
Maybe go ahead, Professor.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks all the colleagues share their experiences and a very interesting topic. Even some of the presentation is very sad. However, I have to highlight. I'm fully agree to the what is so-called culture. It's cultures from the human daily life, and especially in the 21st century, that we have to respect the very important point is so-called cultural diversity. And in the 20th century, maybe some of the cultures so as a good culture or bad culture, but no, it's strong or weak. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm very sure you can understand what I'm meaning. And every culture should have a root, have a land to grow up. So that is what Christina mentioned, that the bottom up, I think it's very important for us to think about it. And also what is so-called resilience. Resilience is from cannot be forced by the government or top down, should be keep in mind daily life. However, a very, very big challenge from the nature or developing or economy pressure development. So you can see the presentation from Lima. The city center or the World Heritage Center looks so nice, but the surrounding, we have very big problem. But however, if we can use realize the importance of resilience should accompany with the community and via the capacity building. I also noticed there are several presentations. They all mentioned the importance of capacity building. So maybe I'm talking too much. I think during this severe period and the pandemic or lockdown, and we have maybe it's have some more time for us to look back, and we can rethinking about what is the origin of the culture and the working together with the community and help they to proceed the culture, such as my case study in Chonglin settlement. They have their ancestor worship for more than 1,000 years. 1,000 years. It's a very unique tradition, and nobody forcing them to do it. And every year, to the certain time, they know what they should do. But the young generation, they try to sorry, the elder the family, they try to teach the young generation to learn the traditional knowledge through the ceremony. So I think it's one of the good way to so-called resilience. And I'm very sure, I fully agree. Even we use the word so-called the everydayness or daily life is a kind of we have to realize is the importance of the core of the culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Artan and Doriana.
Yes, so Related to what we presented as a case study, that is the National Theatre, what I would like to emphasize is the fact that for tangible heritage, as it's a building or heritage sites, we have to transpass beyond a relation with the building as the relation to knowledge or to information. In order to communicate, we have to place the right, as a culture is a human right. So in order to make it part of our daily life, we have it's the right to the city, something that have to be built inside from and grassrooted first of all in our basic rights, in order to know what is and to embrace and then to know and better understand it. If we don't understand it, we can't create a sense of place, and then is where identity is missing. So what the pandemic maybe, especially to me speaking personally, as I've been involved in this case study and in this cause, this civic cause also as an activist, is exactly that if something is the heritage and the right to the city is something we live each day, and it's part of our human participation, it doesn't matter if a pandemic is over, you know, because even the restriction to some to move or to be out of the house or in certain hours, we managed to arrange also to the pandemic. So at the occupation case, the theater was our house. So nothing changed at that moment because it was integrated inside our daily life. It was like a lifestyle. It prolonged it over the years, and it's something that you have to deal with it. It's something you feel. So it's the sense of place, and it's where this connection and this part where the human connects with the material, and where the resistance developed and grassrooted.
I want to add something more about the second question more that Christina answered about the conflict that arises. And I think that sometimes it depends, culture depends between if we are talking about something as a right or something as a need to express it. Sometimes we talk about cultural heritage as defended by constitution or by laws or by regulations. Sometimes we have informal forms of a right to express ourselves as a culture. And these are two different dimensions. I think that the biggest problem sometimes, or conflicts, sometimes arises when? The first case it is when two different populations have different rights to express their culture through laws and regulations. The second case, it is when someone has the right to express it, but his own right is not by constitution. It's not fixed by as a right to express it freely without police permission or other forms. Instead, the other, it is more oppressive when you don't have neither the right to express your culture. And this is what has happened during the pandemic lockdown in Albania. So even by constitution, you can lock down the Albania by 19 days, not anymore. After 9 days, the government should give up, should make the tests, should go to the home by home and other forms. So the constitution has been blocked by these political decisions. And that's what I think where the conflict arises.
Thanks. Tarek?
Yeah, they are really two big questions in a way. answering them they can be answered from different perspective, and that's really the importance of such table or such discussion, to touch upon different aspects. But I can agree with everyone about like informality or informal behavior. In a way, how we use our spaces, how we behave is part of culture, but also how we use how we perceive our heritage and how we communicate with our heritage is really another type of culture people start to address when they are operating or informally behaving within this cultural context. The most important thing about everydayness, basically, especially if I move back to heritage and cultural heritage preservation and conservation, I would like to insist on the concept of contemporary social values. So conservation profession now in terms of tangible or intangible preservation work is basically sometimes ignoring this concept, how this heritage is related to this particular time and this debate and social values. Because if we are trying to reinforce heritage into young generation in a way they will not perceive it, that will not allow this heritage to continue. So we really need to relate heritage into the debate of the generation we are dealing with, to just respond to the basic definition of conservation or preservation, preserving the past, bringing it to the present, and communicating it to the future. If we really don't work around the development around about this chain over time and relate heritage, whatever form of heritage we are talking about, into the development, we will lose heritage. And that is clearly happening in countries like taking a very conservative approach about heritage, about either touch nothing, or I'm talking about physical and non-physical here, but I bring some examples that show how heritage was lost basically physically because of non-appropriate concept of conservation taking on board without of non-touching heritage or interacting with this heritage. But also about the perception of community, preservation of heritage, and those contemporary social values is basically how this current community perceives that heritage. And that is really problematic and really important in the meantime, because you have different types of communities, like what colleagues already mentioned, and you really need to create the balance between those different communities with different priorities. I experienced myself that in preserving very small structure, the conflict between young generation interest and elder generation interest around ruined archaeology. So totally different interests, totally different contemporary values, and that basically the preservation is not an easy task for to communicate these values between young and old generation. But basically the common ground is the important part. Here, another example I can mention here about dark heritage. And dark heritage is one of the most problematic area of heritage studies, just because of the sensitivity of this heritage. I'm talking about heritage coming as a result of conflict, crisis, pandemics, this heritage associated with dark memory. Sometimes people prefer to wipe it, and that is not really the correct approach always. We have noticed what happened in Lebanon, for example, in the historic town of Lebanon, when part of the historic town was wiped away to install a very contemporary mall structure and more complexes, in order really to bring Beirut into the contemporary time in terms of usage, but also to as an approach to wipe the results of the civil conflict in the city. But that is not the case in every dark heritage. It will not be successful. One evidence basically about it is the memorial of Hiroshima, the only building survived the Hiroshima bombing event, it was preserved as a statement basically against the behavior, against the event, but also as a resilient, as a state of resilience. So that's why basically when we deal with such sensitive matters, we really need to take community on board. And that's, I'm mentioning about the roots, the bottom-up approach, how roots can really inform the growth of this heritage and the perception of this heritage, and how we can communicate it together with community to their future generation. I hope I covered the two questions fairly in a way.
Thanks so much. Before we pass to Claire, I would like to address this idea you just posed with, I think everybody shares, but ought to be stressed, which is how to relate heritage to our contemporary time, how to stop it from being something you don't touch, you just watch, or worse, something just for tourism, right? How to relate heritage, not just to our time, but to our place and to our people, just not just as a mean to sell tickets and to gain something, right? I'm sorry, Claire, I just cut you across. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was struck by several ideas that were brought up across the presentations, and I'm still sort of processing what I think about how these ideas intersect with the problem of everydayness. The first one that Alex put on the table was the issue of tourism. And I feel like tourism is, like you just mentioned it, Christina, tourism is one of those things that, I mean, I hate to say it, but it has become the stuff of everyday life for many people around the world, and so it has been transformed into a form of cultural heritage, if you will, because it is woven into the everyday life of many people in many places, economically, socially, all of those things. And so I was very curious when Alex put the idea on the table that suddenly it stops, because of the pandemic. And what did it mean for those people for whom it was the stuff of everyday life? And so I want to know more, right, about what happened in those places. And they're like, we could probably point to a million around the world, that happened to. So that's one idea. The other idea that really struck me, Tarek's, the heritage buildings, right? These sort of carefully preserved heritage buildings, those sort of beautiful courtyard buildings, and how they could be repurposed during the pandemic. And I wanted to know more about that too, because that just seemed like a really interesting confrontation of the emergency of everyday life. Everyday life is full of emergencies, even little ones, right? And this was a big one, right? The pandemic. And so I thought that was just such a beautiful idea, that these buildings would function better, right? They would be better places to be housed. I thought that was really interesting. And then Jose's idea of this intergenerational, stitching together, I guess, if you will, the Lima's, more formal cultural heritage and it's the everyday local knowledge heritage. I think the intergenerational aspect of things was something that I was thinking about a lot when I was talking about the tribal communities in the United States, because they hang together, these people. They really stitch together across all the ages. It's very important, and it's very different than what happens in everyday life in most parts of the United States outside those communities. So those are just, just some thoughts. I would love to like talk about each of those thoughts forever, but I won't.
Thanks, Claire. Jose?
Well, I want to talk more about what you last say, Cristina, and I think one of the main problems that we have with our heritage, and I think all over the world, that the value we give to the heritage, the physical heritage, the tangible heritage, sometimes and most of the times is based on aesthetics, on how it looks, and it's really visual. And also tourism wants to sell the experience through how the place looks, but not how the place feels, and it's really important to start thinking how the history has come, and how that place has been transformed through time, not on an aesthetical dimension, but on the social dimension. Talking about gentrification, about social climbing, about how communities are related inside those places, can be maybe a solution, or not a solution, but a better approach to think how the heritage and the places we are trying to live in can be better places, and how the communities that are based on those places can have a real advantage, an economical and social advantage of the place they are living. Most of the times, living in a historical center is more a problem than a value, and lots of people try to live there because they're cheap places. So as local governments, as academics, as countries, as world, what we have done with heritage to give the value for it based on how it looks. We have maybe forgot that the people are the most important asset of the places where we live. So maybe we need to think more about
that. Thank you all for indulging me in addressing those subjects. I would like to know if you would like to address one another, ask questions specifically to one another. And you could, I don't know if there is a possibility to raise your hand or just, open up your mics and talk about whatever you like. And if you don't, I'm threatening to keep on going. So, yes, Alex.
Yes, maybe I can say a little bit more about the Jinmen, because the tourists, the number of the tourists maybe only half after the pandemic, and they lose the income from the tourists, maybe 30% of their income, but mostly the influence was in the city, in the downtown, but the villages actually is still okay, but due to the loss of tourists, the pressure is not so big as before. The pressure also getting down, so they have some possible time to think about how to preserve their environment and their settlements, such as in Chongling villages, they have about 400 settlements, 400 houses in that villages, maybe 10% or 15% of them were abandoned due to some overseas people to the Singapore or Malaysia. Those houses were abandoned. But in this, during the past 2 or 3 years, we cooperate with the local community and the local NGO. They transfer the right for the management of those abandoned houses, and the government, they prepare some financial aid to restore a part of them. And in this case, those abandoned houses can reuse as a public usage. Then that means in these villages, in Chongren village, 400 houses, they all have their own usage. And some old traditional houses, of course, they transferred their usage as a B&B. There are many B&B using the traditional houses, but the interior can be renewed, but the exteriors and the environment are still controlled under the cultural heritage law as preservation areas. Thank you.
Okay. May I? Yes. So one of my in my studies and related, I will relate to Tirana as I've explored and studied more what is happening, and in addition to what about the villas or these one family buildings that are now heritage sites. The first that happened is the abandonment as people migrated or emigrated, and later on as the state during transition period, at least these 30 years never restored them, or so the buildings that are mostly from 1st century or maybe back from 19th century now are being lost due to the lack of maintenance, due to the fact that nature is growing over them. So, and after some times they just are, you can't anymore restore them, so they are being demolished. And there are dozens of them being demolished each day, as they are all private villas or private tenures. What concerns me is the fact that the owners or even the community that lives in these areas can't or never calculated the real value, like to translate the cultural value into an economic value. So in addition, for them to know what they are destroying as they leave the building unrestored, and the state is unprepared or unwilling to restore and to maintain, to build protocols of care for these buildings, they never know what they have lost in terms of economic value. Because they are missing the protocols or even the methodologies to evaluate the cultural value. So what is, we're discussing back, what is cultural value in terms of economic, how to translate something for people to be more integrated or understandable. In conversation and interviews with people who have something, who have a building, a monument of culture, instead they will always choose to destroy the building and to replace it with a multi-story building, because the new structure is offering them much more money, and it's offering them a house with more affordable house, with maybe half of the building will be there as new owners of this, and maybe they will live for 10 years with those money. And the heritage is always old, and as being old, the protocols of care are have a lot of economic value, and especially inside the country, people are poor and cannot care for the building, and the state doesn't want to. So is a conflict inside, as the public value of the building, that is the heritage, the value of all the people. Now it's in conflict with the private right and the right to develop, or to the private tenure. So this conflict now, it's taking a lot of pressure on the building itself, and it's the economic that rises above this, and at the end, money takes always the decision. So they are being destroyed due to lack of money and lack of maintenance, and the pressure is high, because heritage sites are, especially in city centers or during the coast, or in places with the value of the land that is raising up. So this type maybe economic, especially all over Mediterranean, in Europe, and especially Balkans, it's facing this neoliberal economy that is putting too much pressure on especially on the centers of the cities, and destroyments is happening in Kosovo, in Serbia, in Albania, in Bosnia also. So this is happening all over, but in different scenarios. Maybe Albania is the laboratory, and where everything happens like in the extreme ways. But to conclude, I'm just interested in knowing how to evaluate, or how to for cultural value to become more valuable in terms of money, as if this
Values.
In terms of values, so people could translate it. When I say to somebody this has values, he said to me, how much money? So I can't translate it in money. And this is, I think, in this moment, it's maybe the emergency in order to create a methodology, or in terms of maybe to know how much we have lost, if what we lose, it's much more that we build. So to make a balance, and to know what we are losing in terms of economy. Maybe it will be like a rising star, something to say, okay, now we know. Maybe in terms of economy. Okay, this is my comment. I don't know, it's just a question that I'm trying to answer by studying, but it will be very helpful if somebody could answer, or direct to my concerns. Artan, would you say something? Okay.
I think if I can follow up, not directly on that, but from what we learned from that exploration in Egypt. During this exploration within this vernacular context, although we were focusing on the pandemic attributes as part of our analysis, but we found out how much diverse activities, how much diversity happening in this very enclosed, let's say, or very hidden context, starting from the house itself into some components in the house. You never know that they are semi-public. They use the roof a lot, for example, into different activities, and the use of the public space, which during pandemic and maybe beyond pandemic is something of concern for public space in particular, particularly for safety for women. And we could see that how women safely, especially within, let's say, some a context with some cultural and social specificities, women were more comfortable to use that public space, more comfortable to engage with that public space, while other generations are using the space in different way. That made me reflect on something we do in our current practices of architecture and urban design, particularly when we compare this context into the new urban sprawl. And that's what led me to just talk about one of the Middle Eastern initiatives linked to that particular things is a project we are collaborating in with the University of Jordan, and is about regenerating cities during crisis, in a way with different sorts of crisis, and how we can bring culturally rooted approaches, acceptable approaches into the regeneration of public space, the regeneration of architecture, the regeneration of cities, and the regeneration of heritage. I think the way of linking disciplines, unfortunately, like when we talk about heritage experts and when we talk about architecture or urban designers, they don't talk to each other in a way. So everyone working in their own sphere, and that is the lost opportunity by designing or even bringing cities or bringing neighborhoods into life, that really a community can practice their culture, that can practice their attributes, can feel like they are related and they are resilient in this context, but also the context gives them this potential resilience that they can perform and they can live within. So I think I don't know if that respond to the colleague inquiry, but I think the way forward is basically by thinking about how we can see beyond our disciplines, how we can think about the interdisciplinary aspect of our discipline and the multidisciplinary aspect in order really to bring holistic approaches, holistic solutions to the built environment, to heritage, but also to the people, to the community, which everything dedicated for. I hope that can give some other steering thoughts around the group.
I would like to stress taking what you just said, Tarek, about how to be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. Part of the problem might be the fact that people who work in heritage, whether it's tangible or intangible, tend to have some, I wouldn't say special, but they're like sensible to the argument of the heritage site or phenomena or experience itself. Whereas a lot of people do not necessarily recognize that value, just like Doriana said, you know, what's the value, okay, in terms of money. So maybe one of the tasks ahead is that of education in terms of not just ourselves and our communities, but, you know, a broader sense. And that, I think, starts with reaching out to other disciplines that might not at first be willing to work on preservation. And this is a huge challenge also because maybe I'm mistaken, but I think that it's not bottom up or top down, it's both ways, and it has to be some sort of balance between both ways. How there are regulations, but we cannot just rely on regulations, and there are grassroots initiatives, but we cannot just rely on grassroots initiatives. And something that struck me when you made your presentation and you talk about the earthquake and how the civil society showed up, you know, stepped in and helped the population because the state was not able to cope with the problems. And I think that's a history we can all relate to. And talking about the languages, how many efforts about preserving the original languages are being made by the state or by government? And I'm about to bet none or very few. So it depends largely on civil society and on local communities. But we cannot just allow local communities to carry the weight of this huge responsibility on their shoulders, because it can happen what it just happened in Tirana, right? That at some point at 4 a.m. something happens that is stronger than communities, and that's a risk we have to be very aware of. So, well, it's kind of gloomy. I'm sorry, Claire, you wanted to say something?
Oh, well, I just wanted to jump in with a little bit of news about, you said the state is not preserving languages. Yes, this is probably a truth that can be applied, you know, around the world. However, in the latest pandemic relief bill under the Biden administration, there is specifically money directed at language preservation, using that language, language preservation, which is revolutionary as an idea. And so I suspect, it's been, decades and decades of grassroots efforts on the part of tribes. And I know this is happening in other parts of the world too, but the United States is like especially endangered, the languages. But it's been decades and decades and decades of grassroots efforts that have put this on the table. And it took somebody, the Biden administration, who is sensitive to those issues, to put it in the language of, state-sponsored program. So it's a good thing.
It would be interesting to see what happens once those two forces meet.
Exactly. We'll
right?
see.
We'll see. Well, we're sadly running out of time. Humberto, I don't know if you'd like to add something to the table?
Yeah, it was very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Cristina, and all the speakers. I think that the last word of Claire are really really important. The importance of language to keep involved with the culture, with the territory, with the the tradition and the knowledge, that traditional knowledge. And I would like to again thanks and to invite all of you to follow us in the rest of the month. We will have any others interesting session next week. Next week we will start with the third week of the seminar. The program for the next month will be the session Identity and Resilience in World Heritage Sites, and will be moderated by Leonardo Freitas and Bruno Coutinho. And thank you again. And see you next time, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day, evening, or whatever applies.